Welcome everybody to Paradime's 6th, 7th live stream, where we are showcasing our latest product. I don't even think it's a feature. I think this is just a new product for us. It is DinoAI. And before we get started, my name is Parker Rogers, and I am joined by our two co-founders of Paradime, Fabio and Kaustaf. So Kaustaf, how about you give us a little kickoff, and then Fabio, you're going to the demo.
Yeah, thanks, Parker. Super excited to be here. I'm Kaustaf. I'm one of the co-founders of Paradime. And we've seen some amazing traction among the data analytics community over the last few weeks that we have launched DinoAI, which is our cursor for data experience. And I think what I'm finding more and more is that there are folks who are starting to use DinoAI with a healthy and constructive cynicism or skepticism to start off with,
including us.
Yeah, can it do it? Can it solve the problem that I'm looking to solve? And then they get very positively surprised that, oh, it actually works the way I want it to work. And I find it very interesting because I also approached AI with that mindset that can it solve the problem that I'm trying to solve? And then it actually solves. And then I'm like, okay, let me push it further. And every time you do something and you want to push it further. And I think that's what we are also trying to do with the product. We're building something and seeing, okay, how far can it go? And then can you push it further? And we've released so many things over the last few weeks. So I think it's fitting that we put all the stuff that we released together into one consolidated demonstration of what is possible today using DinoAI. So I'm super excited about what Fabio is going to do because I haven't seen what he's going to do.
And the beauty of this is Fabio is going to have several interactions with DinoAI. He's probably going to create a couple bugs, but what's perfect is that in a live demo, he's also able to debug it using DinoAI. So with no further ado, Fabio, we're ready to kick off the demo.
Awesome. Sounds good, everyone. I'm Fabio, the co-founder. I'm going to walk you through a few use cases and an example using DinoAI. So the first thing I want to walk you through is we have a production pipeline that executed earlier, and we have some errors, right? So we have a couple of issues within that schedule. Paradime offers a webhook integration to Jira, which means that on the back of those jobs failing, we can create your tickets. So far, all good. Now, the question is something broken, somebody has to fix it, right? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use DinoAI and use our Jira integration to basically look at how we can solve that bug and how we can solve those issues. This is our code ID. We have a common project here with a bunch of models. I'm currently on the main branch. And what I'm going to do is open the DinoAI panel, and I'm going to choose a tool, which is the Jira tool here, and I'm going to paste in a prompt, which is, hey, Dino, I have a production run that failed this morning. Details are in this Jira ticket. Can you help me resolve it? So using the agent to basically fetch information about the ticket and take a set of actions on the back of that. So what we just saw is the agent was asking, okay, can I access the ticket? Can I see some of the information that's there? Was able to find what kind of errors were part of the ticket. And because I'm on the main branch, the first thing that it's going to do now is use our terminal tool and create a new branch for me using the Jira ID, so following the best practices on how to work with them. Now he's basically going through this pretty interesting use case where he's actually listing in my environment the issues that were part of the ticket and also starts scanning through and reading through those files. So effectively, it's trying to work it out what was the error, how to fix it. If we go back just before here, okay, there was one error here related to an invalid column, another error related to an unexpected alias there, and then some other column-related issues. So after reading through the files, the agent is able to autonomously going and finding what are the files or models that it needs to fix. It was able to come up with a set of actions. So the first thing we want to use our integration to Snowflake, which allows the agent to fetch in real time metadata of our databases, schema, table, columns. All these things are required to get as much context as needed to work with our DBT model. So I can click on accept here. And what is happening now is fetching related to these schemas and tables is trying to find effectively what is the right column in there and what those things are. So one of the key features of the agent is the ability to autonomously fetching this information right from the database. So it's not going about, okay, let me just double check a couple of things. So it's searching for the sources that I have in there, is trying to investigate what are the information that is required to basically resolve these tasks. So as we hear, the first thing is, okay, well, can you look into the F1 database and inside the schema. So it's casting more information, providing the right level of results there. Now there is a little bit matter of what to look for. It's going to go and look for the source table, trying to understand more about the columns that are part of it. And I think that's the beauty of this kind of like agentic experience, that the human is in the loop, right? So we work alongside the agent itself to try and find issues and solve them. The first thing now is it's able to find the columns and the tables. And it's basically suggesting the first fix here, which is, okay, I found basically that there was a column misconfigurations there. I can update the file. I can click on accept. So the first file is now updated. And now it's going through, okay, let's go ahead and check the other table, the other issue I had with it. So I can click on accept. It's now finding metadata related to that table that had a bug before, and ultimately looking at the actual SQL file and SQL model to understand what needs to be fixed and how it needs to be fixed. So it's suggesting more fixes, more resolution. In this case, it's related to this casting we have in Snowflake. Then ultimately is looking at the races table here and looking at how to best solve the last bug that we had there around the production pipeline that just failed, right? You find that the issue seems to be with the join condition and using race ID and not ID, so kind of classic primary key, surrogate key problem. Now the last files that needs to be solved there, and really taking us through step by step all the different actions and configuration that had to be updated for us to resolve this problem now. So on the back of that, we went and looked at, we did also a bunch of renaming. We'll look into how this actually works within Paradime. And fundamentally, we resolved the first set of issues. So I can click on accept now. This is how we can go through a workflow where the agent is able to do a few things. It can fetch metadata from a Jira ticket or a Jira issue. So the place where normally we'll be recording and auditing code changes and things that are part of our work, was able to get more context from the repository, having a live connection to our Snowflake account, so that was able to fetch metadata related to our tables, schemas, and databases, again, enriching the context, and then using the terminal tool to create a branch, but as we can see now, also to complete and finalize those steps, right? Which is, okay, now I want to also finalize this process by creating a commit and kind of defining what kind of changes and work we've been doing here. So basically going through an end-to-end flow without me touching anything related to the code base in a way. So this is pretty exciting. I think it's one of the things that is shifting completely the way how we operate within our DBT project. Like having all these different tools and the agent can interact with it autonomously is pretty exciting. It's something we're super excited about Paradime for what we build and what we are continuing building. So that's why I say cursor for data is a lot about this, right? So how the human interaction fits into the agentic experience and how we can provide the right level of tools and parameters to the agent to do the right thing, but also keeping us in the loop. Let's suppose that now I want to go through another use case, and it's pretty common, I think, within the DBT space and doing data development in general, is that as I was working through all those different things, we new data then got loaded into our databases, right? Essentially, there is like new tables that are ingested from our data engineering team. So we need to make sure that those things are kept there and worked out in sync. I'm going to go and use now another feature we have in Paradime, which is the ability to use the agent to update our YAML files in very different ways. And this example will be about updating sources, but it could be about updating pretty much anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on this for now to bring some visibility there. And I'm going to go and I'm going to start. I want to start completely from scratch here. So the scenario here is I have some data related to the former one data sets I'm working on, and I want the agent to update that sources.yml. So I can use this feature called attachment, where I can search for a file and I can search for my sources.yml file. And here I'm basically now pointing the agent to look exactly into that file and find relevant tables in that schema in Snowflake to understand what has changed and how that file needs to be updated. So those are those sort of tasks, and they're very time consuming. It's hard to maintain, usually track on those changes. It's hard to keep those all in sync. With this now, we can simply let the agent do this for us. It went about and said, okay, I'm comparing what is in the current sources of YAMLs in dbt. I'm comparing this against what are the tables available within that existing schema. And I'm actually now generating or updating my YAML file with those new tables. So the agent is able to do all these things for us just by providing them a sources.yml file and telling what we're after. This can be particularly useful. I know that in many cases, tables and particularly schemas can contain a lot of table, a lot of columns. So how do we keep track of those? How we update them? The agent is a pretty powerful tool to help us doing those kind of tasks as part of our dbt development. So this is the wrapping up on now generating the file. We'll see what the diffs are in here. And as you saw also just earlier, it's like every time we make those changes to the file, the agent is providing us with this option to accept or reject, right? So this is where we talk about having the human in the loop, so that if I don't want to add this, or if I want to change or remove or modify anything of the output, then the agent just generates. I will just choose to click on accept or reject in any way I like. I'm going to go ahead and click accept here. And we complete our second task as well, which is, again, updating YAML files and working with YAML files in general for different purposes. So the other thing now is going one step up in the process, which is how do we actually start writing some code, and how do we write the SQL in a way which is consistent in our projects. One other thing I want to touch upon very briefly is what context means as part of DinoAI and where does it come from. It comes from your repo, it comes from your database, it comes from the tools we enable the agent to interact with. But one of the key elements related to how the agent interact with our project is what we call dinorules. So dinorules are effectively a set of configuration that you can define as part of our repository dbt project, which can span from anything on the SQL style and how the SQL should be generated, to how the documentation should be generated, to any additional business logic and information that you think might be relevant for the agent to know, as well as what kind of behavior you want to enforce in certain different conditions there. Generate anything you want here, anything that you think is useful for the agent to know, so that the agent can do a great job, which is relevant to your own particular rules you have there. So when this is set up, basically every time we interact with the agent, is fetching those configuration done rules and make sure that those are included as part of your response and your prompt. So the thing I want to do now is I want to basically say, hey, can you go ahead and now create also a file in the folder called staging for the pit-stop source? So basically, can you go ahead and create also the SQL file for some of the new source table we added to the project. Now it's going to go and basically find the model, okay, and create the staging model for me inside the folder, which is model/staging. And if you see here, it's now generating the SQL file based on my rules, right? So making sure that we use trailing commas, always use uppercase for SQL keywords, snake case for namings, all these sort of things are basically defined within my rules, are basically enforced as part of generating the SQL files for me there. So it's pretty exciting. I think we've seen a lot of use cases where this can be useful, not only when we're generating new SQL file, but also how can we use dinorules and passing context from existing files to refactor them, make them more readable, restructuring, all these sort of things that we want to save time on doing, we can actually do it that way. The last couple of things I want is, now that we updated our sources, something I've seen here, there are no source freshness checks. We should keep our project healthy and make sure the test are in place and the documentation is in place, but particularly source freshness are quite useful because they help us understand whether we have the right cadence in ingesting data, and we can run our refreshes at our cadence there. What I'll do is I'll create a new chat, and I'm going to use another prompt here, which is, hey, can you add some sources, source data? I know that this data doesn't change that often, so I don't need the sources to be checked every hour. And I can say every 2 or 3 weeks, for example, right? And again, I can use the attachments in their files. In this case, again, I'm going to use my sources.yml to point to that context there. And here we can now, again, scan through the files, and the agent is going to come up and generate a bunch of updates for us on defining what are our source configuration or source freshness that we can set up as part of our YAML files. Again, this is quite useful when we have to basically working not only on building or creating SQL file, but also when we have to think about data quality and how we make sure that we manage the quality of our data pipeline at scale. On the back of this, we'll get a bunch of select tests that will be added here, particularly around freshness, which is pretty powerful tools on its own. And I think this is where, again, having something like DinoAI to help you create those files is helpful for any team that makes those changes at scale. One of very exciting use case I've seen some of our customers use is about how to generate tests. The agent has access to all the test suites of dbt, whether those are unit tests, schema tests, data tests, you name them, external libraries, all this. So we can actually work with the agent to build a much more strong and correctly managed dbt pipeline. In the meantime, we just wrapped it up on generating these sources as well now. So we decided to go ahead and add our source freshness checks at the top of our model. And we can now also see what kind of configurations were enforced on the back of that. And it's also now suggested, like, hey, do you want me to also run dbt source freshness to check where these things are? Again, using the terminal tool, this is going to send us all this information, say, fetching metadata, and we can see right away that, okay, actually, we told them between 2 to 4 weeks was fine, but a lot of those tables are actually coming a lot slower than what we expect, right? So it's coming to suggest, like, okay, do you want me to extend the periods? What shall we do on the back of that? So what I like about the agent and what I find super exciting is this kind of conversation that helps me understand exactly what is happening at any point in time. It's just not going on its own and building a bunch of things. It's helpful to have that context, having this kind of conversation as well. The last thing I want to do now is something that I get asked quite regularly when there are new dbt versions is how do we go and update core, right? So we know that in a few weeks, probably we'll see dbt core version 1.10 going live, and it's very exciting. There are some pretty interesting new features there already, but the question is, how do I go about doing this, right? We can use the agent to help us actually understand what needs to be done and how it needs to be done and what kind of actions we can take on the back of this. So I'm going to go ahead and create finally just a new chart, and I'm going to go here and select Perplexity. Paradime integrates natively with Perplexity to provide real-time web search, meaning that we can use the Perplexity API to allow the agent to get relevant, up-to-date knowledge and information from our web search as we speak. So the documentation for version 1.10, for example, is pretty new. And I would say, hey, I want to upgrade my dbt core to 1.10. Can you tell me what are the key areas I need to focus for smooth upgrade in my project? I can go ahead and press enter. And now what we're going to see is the agent effectively creating a web search for us, scanning through the result, giving us also all the relevant references to that response, which I think is super powerful for us to truly understand what is about to happen, what is we expect to happen as part of this, and fundamentally provide a breakdown of what are the breaking changes, what are the deprecation notices, what are the key features. So for example, we will have the dash sample flag. That things what becomes powerful is also this is how we recommend upgrades, right? So what do we do? How do we do it? Update your packages of YAML, make sure you tested things properly, and ultimately also like, okay, do you want me to research any specific information related to this process, right? Think about the agent ultimately a companion that you can use for writing code, update documentation, update YAMLs, generate tests, fix bugs, all these sort of things. But it's not only about that. It's also like, how can we have somebody can help us through migrating to different dbt versions and package management, all these sort of things that are like part of our regular work as a data practitioner. So yeah, super excited. I know we have a couple of minutes left for a little bit to surprise as well.
Thank you very much, Fabio. And one last thing that I think is worth showing is using GitLite with DinoAI to commit your code.
Sure, yeah, let me go through that. So nobody likes to write commits, and I think at some point we said, okay, we need to provide something better to people or actually generate relevant commit messages. In the GitLite panel we have here, if I want to create a commit, I can actually do through this. I can click on write commit, and this will basically scan through our changes, generate using AI a commit message, which is relevant and confirms how to write those messages there. And now if I click on commit and push, this will also now commit our changes, push them through mode, check that I'm not falling behind.
It's a small and mighty feature. So if you're a dbt developer and someone on your team is responsible for reviewing your code, reviewing every commit that you do, this is a high quality way to help your team understand what you're building. So even if it's a YAML file, you updated some dbt models, it's all going to be included in there. So it's going to scan your entire repository and give you a commit message that's very clear and concise for your team. So it's a very powerful feature. Thank you for showing that, Fabio.
No worries.
And before we sign off, Koustof, you want to give us the final sign off? It can
Yeah,
be
I
as simple as a salute.
I think this is really impactful because this covers the full cycle of day-to-day analytics engineering work. So this, I think, is a great example of everything you would do on a day-to-day basis. Thanks, Fabio, for running us through all of this in one single loop, because this is the cycle that plays over and over again in everyone that wants to be on the forefront of next generation of analytics engineering.
And something that we're doing with documentation that is very helpful is anytime we release a new feature or capability in DinoAI, we add to the documentation. So the documentation isn't just broadly how do you use this. We have very specific use cases. So if you're interested in using DinoAI, we offer a free trial where you can connect your repository, you can connect your data warehouse, and you can start developing. And on top of that, you can click into our documentation. Everything has step-by-step instructions. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Fabio, for the demo, and we will see you next week.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.